And today I'm going to talk about leading reports, right? A lot of companies are using that in their content marketing playbook, right? So I'm going to discuss about pros and cons, how to build your industry leading report, bypass all of the mistakes you'll make, and just get a report out as soon as possible. All right, so stay tuned. So I'll tell you when I first started, kind of thinking about industry reports, right? So about roughly about 3 years ago, I conducted like a 3 month long study on freelancing trends, and the interesting thing was that I revisited it a couple of days ago. I'm pretty impressed that it continues to drive results even today. It's gotten something like 170 media mentions from the New York Times, Forbes, CNBC, Entrepreneur, and it just continues to do that. Even after 3 years, right? So I've really just when first of all, an industry report is basically when you like take data in your industry and kind of bring up insights, basically do like a report around your industry which kind of validates some insights which have not been uncovered before, right? So and this is becoming increasingly popular in the in specifically the B2B SaaS world. Lots of companies are doing that today. Why do they do that? So I'll tell you the two pros in there, right? The first is that it gets you great brand coverage. Like I mentioned earlier, the study that I did, right? Like in 3 years, it's generated about 170 media mentions, lots of great backlinks, lots of great brand coverage. I think I've seen a lot of articles that kind of just refer back to that study, right? And when they say that Hubstaff's global freelancing trend study and everything, it's a great way to get brand coverage, right? And the second thing, like I said earlier, was you get lots of backlinks, right? Which is really great if you want to push your SEO a little forward, right? You get a surge of backlinks, and then your domain gets more authoritative. And the third pro is that just outside of your own benefits, it's also a great way to kind of help your audience, right? This is a really well researched, expensive, in-depth piece of content, and people really appreciate those kind of things, so that's why it's really helpful, right? But there are a couple of cons in here, right, which I think which you should know before you kind of go ahead with like building it, right? So first of all, it takes a lot of time and money to craft it, right? It obviously gets easier as you do more and more studies, right? Like the first study took me like over 3 months. The second study took me a month, and I'm guessing a couple of studies later I might just be able to ship it out in 2 or 3 weeks, right? But it takes a lot of time, and it's not just like you need one or two people to be involved in it, and it's going to be expensive. It's not your regular piece of content, right? And the second con with an industry leading report is that there's no way to directly attribute results, right? Brand people always one of the things that is a bit of a challenge in the brand world is that how do you track results basically, right? You can track the backlinks, you can track the brand coverage, right? But how did that brand coverage and the money that you spent directly attribute to actual customers and signups? That's a little difficult to know, right? So I guess that's one of the cons here, right? So and like while I was kind of rethinking this whole industry report, it just so happened that about a month back, at Bonsai, we started working on a report for freelancers, how freelancers have been affected due to COVID-19. And we published those results just 2 weeks back. We've seen a lot of great responses so far. Lots of people, messaging us. They really love the study and everything. And so I just thought that, now that I've, finished this study, so there's a lot of fresh new learnings that I have in here. And then there was a study that I did 3 years ago where I saw the results 3 years later, really how it impacted, right? I think now is a really great time to kind of just share my playbook of really how I built an industry report, right? So first of all, like when, let's say once you've decided that, all right, you want to invest in kind of making like this industry report, right? The first thing you obviously need to understand is that you need to kind of take a new topic or an upcoming topic area that's not yet been covered by a study, right? Like I mean, let's just take for example, I don't know, like human resources, right? So I think there are like probably of 50 studies on like what's the state of human resources globally in in the US, in North America, in South America, in Asia. And these are if you were to kind of build another study on top of that, right, it doesn't make you unique. There's no way to kind of get a lot of brand coverage there, because a lot of reporters won't also pick it up, right? And then when someone's like, let's say, searching for, hey, I'm writing an article about, human resources, and then if I search for state of human resources, your study won't be anywhere found. It'll probably be right at the bottom. In most cases, right? Obviously, there are exceptions. You need to kind of take a new topic or upcoming topic area, right? By upcoming topic area, I basically mean that, take a trend that's really picking up. For example, leadership. I mean, gender equality in leadership, right? Is that something, that we see in, I don't know, the hospitality industry, or like services industries, or all of those things, right? You can just take a unique angle and take that up, because that's something that there's a lot of interest in there, and people would love to see more specific insights from that industry, right? But when I say new, I mean, you really have to think through like what's the new angle that you're going to take before you actually start working on the study, right? And so it basically starts with every study you gotta really ask, like really write up the questions you'd like to cover in the study. And so the way I basically go ahead with this is that I try to think of some questions that I don't yet have answers on a certain topic, and I know there's not a lot of data points in there, right? So if I could take back to the study that I did 3 years back on the HubStuff's freelancing trend study, I knew that there was a lot of studies about really, what's the state of freelancing, how much are people charging, how it's growing, how many people are taking up jobs and everything. That's great. That's a very industry specific report, but that's more generalized, right? But no one had really covered how the top 1% freelancers are kind of getting better clients, are getting longer contracts, and are able to charge higher, right? And these are just certain things that have that are interesting for me as well, because I've been consulting for a while, and I was interested to know these things, like really what's that cream of the crop, what do they do to kind of get these big insights. And so that's what I went for. I decided that let me just kind of go ahead with that. So I just took these 2 or 3 pointers and then started creating questions like how do you kind of make contracts longer, right? Do you go for recurring contracts? Do you go for annual contracts? Do you like work on, like, put in some kind of retainer model or productize your service, all of these things, right? And these are things that I kept thinking about, right? It took me a while. It was probably like a 1-hour conversation with myself, and I got a couple of questions in there. So once you kind of identify what questions you want to ask, right, you can just kind of put those in a form, right? Maybe type form is great because it allows you to kind of do a lot of fancy stuff in service. It's just more specialized. But Google Forms is great too, just FYI. So and Google Forms is 100% free, so you can try it out. Just a couple of things to remember, that when you kind of write up questions, keep these 3 things in mind, right? So first is target 1 or 2 eye-opening data points to kind of get journalists' attention, right? So some of the questions should be like newsworthy, controversial, whatever, like an eye-opening insight that uncovers an eye-opening insight, right? So keep that in mind. The second thing is usually avoid questions that are kind of related to salary or how much money they make and everything, because people are really they don't like to share all of that information, and so you won't see a higher participation if you've got those kind of questions. And the third thing is, like I said earlier, pick up a trending topic. right now it's COVID-19, feminism is big, or all of the world events. Maybe Trump is a big thing, or whatever. Just pick up a trending topic that's going to make the likelihood of your study succeeding a lot higher, right? So once you've kind of written up the questions and put those in a type form, right? Invest a lot of time in promoting the type form survey, right? Type form or Google Forms, or just like this survey, right? Because you need to collect as much data as possible. And so some of the ways that I find the best way to collect data is, first of all, if you're a company, right, you've got your own user base, right, which is probably the biggest asset for you to collect data for this study, right? This is what's going to bring in 80% of the data. Just remember that, right? And this is especially applicable if you've got like a decent amount of users, or a big email list, right? So usually what I do is I would just email our customers, to collect data. I would email our marketing list. That's another great asset. I would also kind of tweet out from my personal account, and mention or tag like 2 or like 10 other famous accounts in my industry. And surprisingly that works great, because usually 1 out of those 10 will kind of retweet that and kind of give you a personal favor, and that kind of makes that into like a whole viral loop basically. And so but obviously these 10 people that you kind of tag, you got to really cater this list carefully, just based on like the relevancy of the survey, so that it makes sense for them to retweet. And the second thing is how big is their audience size, and the relevance of those their audience to yours. It's more of a gut feel, and you'll probably know once you kind of see their account, but that's how you can do it. And the fourth thing is just post on a LinkedIn account or something. There are obviously other ways as well. You can run ads for it. These will be pretty cheap, because it's a pretty, like, there's not a lot of work that we're asking from them. It's very generic data study, so usually you'll see a lot of participation through that, but you may not see a high quality participation. So you've got to kind of weigh the outcome here. So yeah, and like I would just say promote these heavily. I gave you 3 or 4 ideas. There are lots more. You can try different things. You can put like a CTA on your website if you get a lot of traffic in there. You can even partner with another brand. This is something that I'd done at Hubstaff. I got to know that Buffer, which is a social media platform, we're doing like a state of remote work study, and realized that we had like 250,000 remote workers using our platform. So I said, you know what, we'd love to partner with you on the study. You can use our user base to collect the data and everything, and in return we'd love to be like co-partners in the study. And they were very happy to agree with this, because they were able to get like a big remote work audience, right? So similarly, if you kind of reach out to other brands, there's absolutely no harm in co-branding the study, if you manage to kind of get all of these this new audience that can kind of fill your survey. Because not only do you get a lot more data, but you also get a lot more people who've participated in the survey, who you can then email to and then kind of start a relationship. So anyway, this is step 2, right? So step 1 was creating your questions, putting them in a form. Second was kind of promoting this survey. The third thing is, once you kind of have the results, right, usually Google Forms or Typeform or any other survey platform you use, they'll kind of give you like a visual summary of all the data you've collected, right? And basically just use that data to kind of put together a very quick outline of the study, right? So usually my outline, would be like, I'd look at all of these data points. I'd know that 1 or 2 are like eye catching, like 1 or 2 data points are like the most astonishing data points that everyone's just probably going to talk about, and the rest are good things to know, right? So I would read the study, like I would look at the questions and then try to put them based on like what a good story would be. This would be, if you're someone who's done a bit of content writing before, or knows really how to tell a good story, you'd be able to do that. Like for example, with our uh, COVID-19 study that we just published, I had several data points in there, right? And what I realized was that the way those data points flowed pretty well were like, let's talk about really what the situation is right now. How bad is COVID-19? How is it affecting freelancers? Once we've kind of covered that, then we can cover how are freelancers kind of dealing with that, what constructive steps are they taking, and then basically go through that. And that was just because when I looked at the questions, I immediately realized that there were some questions that are talking about the bads, the negatives about COVID-19, and some questions were answering more like the constructive positive bits of how COVID-19 has affected them. So that was my way of doing that, right? So the process that I would recommend is that once you've kind of got those data points, think of yourself, you've got this study, you've been put in like a room, and you got to give a presentation with these data points, right? How would you go ahead with that, right? Record that as a video, record that as an audio note, and you'll immediately know that you have a story in there. That's the best way to do that. And once you kind of build this outline, right, it could be a written outline, it could be video outline, right? Use this outline as a guiding light, create a short video overview of your learnings from the study, right? And then hand it over to like a ghostwriter, or basically lots of writers, what they can do is they can basically just take your outline, you give them the images from the study, or the actual responses, give them your insights and learnings, and they'll craft that together into a beautiful piece. And the good thing is that it speeds up a lot of time, because there's a very likely chance that you're probably you've probably got a lot of other things, and content writing isn't your specialty, right? So when you kind of get a good writer, they can just kind of take this study and then just take it to another level. So I personally find it much faster. So usually I kind of hand over this written outline and video to like a writer, and then they'll just write it in with a better quality than you, and then write it much more quickly. And then eventually, once they've kind of written an outline, usually we have like 1 or 2 sessions of like improving it, right? And you get it done with. So when you're kind of crafting like the when you're kind of working on a version 2 of the study with this writer, right, just a couple of things to keep in mind, right? The first thing, when you've got this whole study written, right, always have like a 15-second snapshot section right at the top, like a real quick TLDR or summary, right, which has like probably the the 2 or 3 biggest data points from the study. Because you got to remember that these are the data points that probably most of the users will read. Most of the journalists won't ever go through your study. They're just going to see those 2 or 3 points and use that to decide if they want to kind of put you into their article or not, right? And those data points will decide if they want to read the rest of the study. So it's very, very beneficial if you kind of put that 15-second snapshot. You can actually see how we did that in the COVID study. I'll have a link for this in the podcast description. So have a look and let me know your thoughts, right? And then when you're kind of crafting the data points, right, there are 2 ways to kind of do that. Or I'd say 3 ways, right? One is you can actually just put the questions, right? Like, for example, how badly were you affected, as a freelancer because of COVID, right? That's a question. Now, another way is you can say that 4 out of 10 freelancers were affected due to COVID-19, right? And the third thing is, you can say is 37% of the freelancers were affected, due to COVID-19. Now, which out of the 3 kind of makes sense, right? So usually the way I look at it is that when you kind of basically remove all of the data and kind of put that into more everyday life things, it makes a lot, it makes it a lot easier, right? So 1 out of 5 people is a lot more relatable than 9% or 20%, just like that. So just kind of think around that. When you kind of write these headlines, instead of questions and everything, kind of try to put those story, right? Like, what were like the biggest learnings in this particular section in the headline itself. This just makes it much more easier for a reader to just flow through. A lot of times people just read through headlines and then just move out, right? and you want to make that easy as well. So yeah, that's what, like, so I mean, that'll just basically help you kind of build like this version 2 and like the final version of the piece. And once you've kind of made it live, now's the time to kind of really promote the study. So in general, the rule is that you should spend about 20% time on creating the content, but 80% of the time on really promoting your study, right? Because you invested a lot of time, money, and you really want to get the max benefit out of it, right? So there are certain household items that you can get done right away, right? Email your entire user base that the study is out. Email your marketing list. Email all your survey respondents that, hey, your response was very helpful. Here are the results, right? And one quick tip in here, when you're kind of sending out an email to them, you can always have like a small ask at the end, right? Maybe add a Twitter share link. Add a Twitter share link, or something that's so simple that they just click on it. Maybe it could be like a Gmail share link or whatever, right? When they click on it, they can just like send that to whoever they need to, right? And this obviously helps and kind of get the whole virality going in, because industry reports kind of thrive on virality. These are pieces of content that will benefit greatly from a viral effect, right? So the first thing is emailing all of these people. The second thing is you can follow that again, right? Tag 10 accounts that are kind of relevant, or the accounts that kind of retweeted the last time, and then tell them that, hey, the study is there. So they'd be more likely, if they shared your survey, they're gonna share the results too, right? You can also post on community forums like Reddit, Hacker News, Product Hunt. Don't expect a lot of success from here. First of all, the community is very highly moderated, so you've got to be really careful. Second thing is, I think this is something that doesn't work anymore, but sometimes it's like a 1 in a million thing. Sometimes something might just pick up. So there's no harm in kind of like just putting it out there on Hacker News. And then what you can also do, and that I would highly recommend, is to individually email about like 100 journalists which recently wrote about the topic that you wrote about, just to kind of get that initial kick. One journalist, even like 1 out of those 100 journalists covers the study, you're for sure then there's like someone covered this, and then another journalist sees their article, then they cover it, and then the whole virality kind of kicks in, and it's kind of like a loop basically. So yeah, like you can do that. You can also kind of spend a couple of $100 on ads, and like focusing on increasing the impressions. Usually like running ads for these studies is actually you can get like a ton of impressions and clicks for a pretty low price. So you can definitely try that to kind of get more brand awareness, because that's one of the goals. And then the last thing is you can also kind of like hire a PR news service like PR Web. Again, not super beneficial. It's like, I think they cost like $250-$300 for their service, and most of them are like, we would give you a minimum 200 placements, right? Which is true, they would give you 200 placements, but most of those are like just they've basically partnered with like a lot of media sites which just syndicate their feed and then remove that 14 days later. So those backlinks don't really count, but sometimes those backlinks do stick. So you get like 10-20 really high quality backlinks from really big sites through this, right? So that makes it worth it. So you can definitely give that a try. And so these are just like some of the initial, like some quick ideas to promote the study. There are obviously a lot more. You can search on the internet about really how to promote your content. And since this is such a well-researched content, it will definitely pick up. So invest a lot of time in promoting the study, right? So yeah, that was just that's been my playbook so far to kind of get the study as quickly as possible, right? There are obviously more additions or subtractions you can do in this playbook, right? For example, instead of the initial questions and form, what you can do is, if you've got a big user base, you can just go into that user base's insights and then use that to kind of craft a study, right? So for example, at Hubstaff, we studied for like the specific attributes of our users, like for example, how much hourly rate do they have in a specific country, in a specific field, to get the data, right? Which didn't really require us to ask them anything. We had that data in there, right? So there are different ways you can kind of tackle the study, but usually with the form and everything, it just makes it a lot more faster. If you've got to parse through your user data, that's going to take a lot more time. And if you've got a huge database, then you'll probably need someone's help, or upskill yourself to understand SQL or R or whatever. So just kind of reflecting back on kind of doing this whole study, right? What were the top learnings, right? I'll give you 6 things, right? Just kind of like a recap. So the first thing is your email list is your biggest asset in terms of collecting data for each of these studies. So utilize that. The second thing is it's efficient and fast to kind of create a video of your learnings and then hand that over to a ghostwriter. You'll be far off better and kind of with the output and the time to kind of get the study out, because a lot of times these studies are time critical, right? And you want to be the first person to be out with the data. The third thing is spend 80% time promoting the study, 20% time actually creating it, right? Then the another point is that just remember the primary goal of the study. It's to get brand coverage, or it's to get backlinks, or it's to help your customers. But usually in my case, it's brand awareness and to get backlinks, right? And so when you've got that kind of a goal in mind, try to make the study journalist friendly, right? Try to kind of read it as a reporter who gets a million pieces of information per day in search of something to write about. Make it incredibly easy and immediately obvious, why they should care and what they should care about. Like, what's the hook? What's the surprising data? What will they look on a headline that they write, right? And then based on that, kind of write the study. And then the last thing I'd say is that use the study as an opportunity to kind of get some branding boost in your space, right? And kind of like repeat it every 3 or 4 months, 6 months, whatever is affordable for you. And if you do this on a consistent basis, right, like every 6 months or every 3 months, your brand will be remembered among folks in your industry, just because they'll know that, all right, these people really create these really valuable pieces of content, right? And this is just something that could be a big part of your content marketing strategy, right? So yeah, just to kind of I hope you got you learned how to kind of craft your industry report, your next industry report. Maybe there are things that you learned, maybe there are things where you can improve, right? If you feel that there's room for improvement, or if there's anything more to add to make this industry leading report better, right? I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear how you would improve it, or how you've done it differently, what your results are. So you can reach out to me in 2 ways. You can email me on madhav@remotemarketing.org, or you can tweet to me at the Mad Bhandari, TheMadBhandari. You can do that. You can also just send me a voice message. Whatever's fine. I just want to get your feedback. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and see you in the next one. Bye.